I'm Kent, and you're watching Weekend Adventure Rides. So this week we're talking all about brakes. What we've done is change the front suspension on the XR to the CRF front suspension, or the Showa front suspension. So of course we're going to have to replace all the XR parts with CRF parts. Now for this, I went on eBay and purchased a new brake caliper, and then that came with some new brake pads, and then our brake lever and master cylinder, as well as a new brake line. So I got all of these for about $40 on eBay. Now they are what appears to be Chinese clones of the Nissan Honda brakes, and they look to be like fairly decent quality. I'm gonna go ahead and use these for 40 bucks. I mean, can't really beat that price. I think they're gonna work just fine. So we'll get those on the bike after we start the assembly process, and we'll test them before we get out on, you know, the heavily trafficked road, and make sure that these work well, they're bled correctly, and that the brakes are, you know, stopping me. So aside from those parts that we bought new, we are going to rebuild the older rear brake off the XR. We're gonna disassemble this to start with, and then I have also the master cylinder. We're gonna rebuild that. So I have the All Balls master cylinder rebuild kit, the brake caliper rebuild kit from Tusk, and then Pro X brake pads. So let's get started on that. Okay, we'll start with disassembling the brake caliper. Remove the banjo bolt first, and along with that, the brake hose. And then brake line, or brake bleeder here. Then our brake pad retainer pin here. That's the cap. Our old brake pads. May have to put it in a vise for this. Oh, actually that was pretty easy. Okay, and we've got the two sides of the brake, and we're gonna be replacing all of the bushings and plastic. So we'll get that cleaned up, get all the brake dust and everything off there, so that's looking nice and fresh. And then same thing goes for the piston here. Okay, that'll get replaced. Okay, so the brake calipers are broken down all the way, pretty easy, only a couple bolts there. And so let's also tear apart this master cylinder. And then remove our hose, like so. Okay, so then the little nut comes off, this dust cover comes off, and then there's a snap ring down in there so that the plunger will come out. So we'll use our snap ring pliers or compressors here. There we go. Okay, and our spring comes out along with the O-rings that are on that, and we've got it disassembled. So now we've got the master cylinder to clean up along with a few parts, and then we'll get all this back together. All right, so I've got a little metal bowl here. I'll put all the parts in there, and then some solvent, really anything you want. I'm just gonna use a carbon choke cleaner and just spray these down. Okay, so we've got those in the solvent, and they've been soaking for a little bit. So we're just gonna take a couple wire brushes, get them cleaned up. Okay, pretty simple. Got everything cleaned up, looking fairly nice. They are brakes, so I'm not super concerned about them looking perfect, as well as the master cylinder. So let's get started putting these back together by taking a look at what we have in the new master cylinder rebuild kit. Okay, we got a new spring, new crush seals there, a few different snap rings. Now this is for multiple bikes. There may be some things in here that we don't need. We've got our plunger here, and we'll disassemble this. I'm gonna take that spring off. So it does come with a new spring, so we're gonna get rid of that one. And then some new seals. Okay, so just using a little pick, we'll get under that, pull that seal off. There we go. So this one has the smaller diameter inside. It goes on the end here on the spring side. Second one has a wider diameter. Okay, so the spring will naturally go here on this end like this. Now you want the bevels to go away from the spring. So they're gonna fit like this. So we'll get those lubricated up with a little .4 brake fluid, so they're gonna slip on there easier. Okay, so it fits on there like that. And then we'll take our next one, bevel the same direction, go ahead and get that lubricated, push our pick through, and walk it over the top. There we go, and those spin freely, nothing's bound up there. We're gonna put our spring on and coat this really well with some brake fluid, and then our spring down into master cylinder there. That post in there, and then our snap ring, we go over the top, compress our snap ring. Okay, and then we're gonna press that down in there until it pops into place. So it seems to be moving freely. Okay, so we have our new cup seal. That's gonna go over the top and down in there and push on the edges down. Okay, and then we have that little retaining nut. And I'll use a pick to grab the edge of the cup seal here and pull it up over the top. Okay, so there we have it. And then we have this little retaining nut, which we use to help set the distance. So this little pin that connects to our brake lever goes on there, and then this nut compresses against that to hold it in place so that this doesn't move. So we'll tighten those down together, and we'll set that once we get it on the bike. Now we have another O-ring, which will lubricate up a little bit. And then that goes down in here, lip in there that it goes and seals down on. So then we have the end of our hose here, this fitting, which will go in there. Okay, and then our snap ring goes over the top of that. All right, there we go. And that'll spin freely. Okay, so we've got the old banjo bolt and our new crush washers. So we'll get rid of the old ones. I'm just gonna set these in there so we don't lose them. I'm not gonna put the line on yet, but it will go right there. When we go back and start assembling the bike, I'll go over this process. All right, so we'll press the old hose back on and then put the hose clamp down. So then we have our top two reservoir. We go down there like this, a little top to that, and the cap. Now that is rebuilt, ready to go on the bike. So we'll carry on and get started on these calipers. So we have the caliper rebuild kit. Okay, pulled the piston out. I'm gonna clean that off a little bit. Now there's two seals. They're gonna go inside here. So we'll get the old ones out. These ones are pretty hard to mess up. There's two, and one is smaller and one is larger, and so just put them back exactly that way. And then we'll lubricate our new seals. And then I'm just gonna work those around. First one's in, lubricate number two. So new seals in there. Then I'm gonna get some oil or some brake fluid, lubricate the outside of that piston, and then we'll push that piston back in. All right, little effort, I got her in there all the way. And it's moving freely. Kind of fold it up the end of there, push that through, pops out, looks good there. All right, and then we have our brake bleeder, which is gonna go right here, and the new cap for this. All right, and then we'll slip that on, get that tightened down. That is an 8mm, which we will use when we bleed the brakes later on. Okay, put the top on that. So we've got the mounting bracket for the brake. Now we have these little retaining clips. Now that's gonna go in there just like that. The opening, they all line up, just makes the most sense anyway. So for the one that actually goes on the caliper, it's gonna go to this side, and there's a little clip that fits over the edge here and snaps on, and that's gonna help retain the new brake pads. We'll need to put on this little rubber grommet. It fits down into a groove here. Just have to kind of walk it around, just like that. And I'm gonna grease up this rod here with some waterproof grease. And slip that back on there. That looks good. Okay, so we'll put this other bolt back in. I am going to put some lubricant on this so that it can move freely back and forth. We'll just put that down here on the end, and then we'll slide that back in here and just snug this up. So now your brake should be able to move back and forth pretty freely there. We don't want that to bind up. Now we're ready to put our brake pads in. So we do have the new retainer for the brakes. We'll get rid of the old one. This one comes with some Loctite on there already. So we'll get this lubricated up. I'm just gonna put a little bit of brake fluid on it. We'll replace this probably most of the time when we replace the brakes, just because it does take a lot of wear. There we go. And we'll tighten that down. Okay, and then there is this little cap goes over the top. Just tighten that down with the screwdriver. There we go. So we have our new rebuilt brake pads now. We will put the banjo bolt back on with the new crush washers, just so we don't lose anything. Crush washer, and we're not going to put the brake line back on yet. We'll do that after we get it back on the bike. Okay, so there we have our newly rebuilt brake caliper and master cylinder. So this is a pretty easy process. I will put links in the description to where you can get the parts to do this. Other than that, I hope you got some value out of this. Don't forget, like, subscribe, and we will see you next week on Weekend Adventure Rides.